Hey everybody, it's Greg. We're at Nexus Property Management, and I'm excited and honored this morning to be with Mike Clemente. Mike Clemente, Rhode Island State Constable and private investigator. So this is going to be a very interesting interview. I already know it. And Mike, how did you get started? What came first, the constable or the investigation?
Oh, the investigation came first, and I tell everybody the same story. It'll be in the book also. Writing several books right now. But it was in 1975, 76. I was in the military police, 119th Military Police Company, Francis Street Armory in Providence. And I had already applied to Providence Police Department. I always wanted to be a police officer, and being in the military police, I looked forward to law enforcement career. And we had drills on a Wednesday and on the weekends, and we had once a year we would go away for summer camp. So it was one of the Wednesday night drills. We were down on the Francis Street Armory, and this was in the early 70s, so there was no pagers, there was no cell phones, there was no communication except for a pay phone or a residential phone, the dial type.
Yep.
So I'm leaving the Francis Street Armory at 11:10, 11:15, because we get out of there at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday night. And as I was leaving, I remembered there was a police officer, Providence police officer, sitting in the parking lot. And so when I left, my mom, where I used to live, is in North Providence, and going down through Onlyville, there was an old Star Market there. And there were, I noticed going by, there was a lot of activity in the parking lot, and there was 5 young people stripping the car in the parking lot.
Okay.
So I shot right back, because it was only a mile and a half from the armory, and I pulled up to where the police officer was sitting in the car. And I pulled right up to the woman. I said, there's 5 people stripping a car, a mile here from here. Right now, you can get them right now, right? And he's got his feet up on the seat, like on the dash, and reading the paper. And he had a cup of coffee. I remember this vividly. And he says, "Can't you see I'm effing busy?" So I opted not to go to the interview with the town council, the city council, and not to be a police officer.
Because of that reason?
Because of that one incident, yeah, and I ended up going into the private sector. I did also get accepted to Pembroke Police Department in Massachusetts in 1982. I tried again, and I took a civil service test. I got a 97.4 on it.
Okay.
And I did get accepted, but I had already moved back to Rhode Island. And they wanted me to move back within 30 days in order to fulfill that. And I opted not to do that. So I opted in 1987 to get my private detective license in Woonsocket, Rhode Island. And when I had first applied, and politics plays a big part in everything, unfortunately. And I had to use politics to get my license, because the police chief of Woonsocket did not want to give it to me at the time.
For what reason?
I'd only been there a short period of time, and also, I don't know if you knew, but there was a big murder investigation going on in Woonsocket at the time in the early 80s. The girl that got bludgeoned to death in the house on Providence Street.
Yes.
We talked about that a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
I think that was part of it as well. Didn't want anybody else maybe interfering with that type of thing, because I did end up actually getting hired for a couple of cases that were very very publicized. One was a missing kid from Bellingham, Mass. They ended up finding a body in Holliston, Mass. And it was interesting because they had first said no foul play expected, and then 3 months later they had I can't think of the guy's name, Norman something. He was a forecaster, like a predictor, whatever, and he claimed the body was in that septic tank that they had checked 3 months ago. And now they check the septic tank, and now they find the body. And I was hired by an aunt of the relative of that person. And to me, that is still an open case, because I believe the kid was murdered. But anyway, so as the story goes, I opened a private detective office, and
In what year though?
I was in opened the office in 1990, 91 in Woonsocket, Rhode Island.
So constable came first and.
No, that was investigation.
So investigation
Came first, right?
Okay.
Exactly.
Got it.
I've been a private investigator for going on 32 years. I've been a constable for 18 years.
Okay.
So during the time of the investigation, I also owned a repossession company, auto repossession company. I was doing repos for the buy here, pay here industry. I believe I had one of the first buy here, pay here car dealerships that I was doing repos for. And how that came about, it was funny because I went to buy a car from that buy here, pay here dealer. And if I talk too much, let me know.
No, you're good. That's what we're here for.
So anyway, I went to buy the car from the car dealership, and I had put down my occupation as private investigator / store detective because I was also working in Zier Ames as a store detective.
Okay.
And one of the books that will be coming out, by the way, in the spring is called Shoplifter, that I'm writing, and it's all about the history of that particular industry. So anyway, the guy, Billy, he asked me, he says, Mike, what do you do for a living as a private investigator? I said, do everything. I said, theft, custody, marriage, whatever it is. He says, let me ask you a question. He says, I got some people breaking into cars and stuff over the weekend. Can you do something like that? So they had charged him like $15 an hour over the period of the weekend back then. Now it's $115 an hour. So just to give you a variation of how much it costs, But so I did it and didn't catch anybody. But he called me, he says, Mike, he says, have you ever done a repo? And I didn't even know what a repo was. You know what I'm saying? I really didn't, and it's like, I had to ask the question, what's a repo? He said, well, that's when people, don't pay their bill in the car. And he said, I own all the cars. The liens are all in my name. He says, so I need somebody to go get these cars. He said, I have 4 of them right now that we can't find. So he said, I'm going to give you these 4. And he says, we'll try you out and see what happens. And he says, I give you, I think it was like $100 for a car at the time, to recover it. In a 48-hour period, I found all 4 cars.
No kidding.
And he was like ecstatic, and he's like, I want you for all my stuff and everything. So he had like 4 or 5 a month or whatever. So they said, you know what? I get a knack for this. So I started looking in the paper for buy here, pay here dealers because they were just springing up in the 80s at that time. They were just starting. So then I had Blackstone Imports, which became later on, it became Pride. Okay. I had Blackstone Imports, Blackstone Imports worked because they had Blackstone Financial and Blackstone Imports. So people bought the car from Blackstone Imports, but financed the vehicle through Blackstone Financial Services. So anyway, so I had them, and they had a little bit more. They had like 6 or 7 a month. And then I ended up getting more buy here, pay here's. I had like 10. And I was almost at the point where I was ready to quit my job, but I still stayed with Zier and Ames till 1991 or 92 when I got hurt in Lincoln Mall apprehending a shoplifter who had put a telephone answering machine in his jacket. And he went out the door and I bear hugged him. I got thrown against the glass. He was on some type of narcotic and I injured my back.
Got it.
So after that, I opened a bait and tackle shop for a brief period of time because that was what I did in Pembroke, Mass. We moved there. Basically, I started doing the buy here, pay here repo, but then I started doing investigation too, because I had the PI license. So I opened an office in Woonsocket in 1990, 91.
What street?
It was on South Main Street in back of Riverview Furniture.
Okay.
And I had people coming into the office to, one funny story is because of the repos and because I had designed what they call a reverse sting called American Sweepstakes. So if you've ever been had by American Sweepstakes and had your car repoed, I was the guy. Created a name called Kent Doyle, okay?
Okay.
And What happened was, how this all came about is, I gotta have a repo, and supposedly the vehicle was in Maine. So, let's say the guy's name was John. So I called up the grandmother in Maine where he was supposed to be living, and the grandmother answered the phone. I said, "Yeah, I'm looking for John." And she says, "Who's this?" I said, so off the cuff, I just said, "This is Ken Doyle from American Sweepstakes, and John has won a major prize. So I need him to contact me right away." She said, "Oh, I haven't seen John in 3 months." And the information was that he was living there, what she was covering for him. Okay. So I said, "Oh, I said, ma'am," I said, "that's too bad." I said, "Well," I said, "you know what? I give him 24 hours. He's got to call me back at this number." So I gave her a number. I didn't even have a set up situation where I had like a number where they could call in, like a trap number. Got that later. So I had an answer machine set up, so I quickly put on the answer machine, "This is Ken Doyle from American Sweepstakes. If you're calling this number, you have most likely won a prize, and your name was picked from a local supermarket or a local shopping mall. Please leave your name, phone number, and we'll get back to you to set up a time to deliver your check."
Beautiful.
So 3 minutes later, guy calls, leaves a message. "This is John. I'm in Lewiston, Maine. Da 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 da. Here's my address. Da da da." So I called John back. I said, "John, this is Ken Doyle from American Sweepstakes." I says, "Yeah." I said, "Listen, we want to set up to deliver your check." I says, "Listen, this is Thursday." I said, "How about Saturday?" So he says, "Yeah, I'll be here all day." So I said, "Saturday, okay." I said, "We'll be pulling up in a silver Mercedes, right? And we'll be delivering
With bars in the back window.
delivering your check." So went up to Maine. At this time, I had a business partner that had joined me in the company, and so we went up there and get up there and knock on the door and had the PI ID, the PI badge.
Or were you holding the balloon like?
No. We were there to repossess the car. We didn't even mention.
You showed up in your normal attire.
Exactly. So we knocked on the door. John answers the door. Says, "John," I said, "Listen." He says, "Oh, you guys from American Sweepstakes?" Had all we could do to stop laughing. You know what I'm saying? I said, "American Sweepstakes?" "No," I said, "We're here to repossess the car." I showed the ID. "Oh, the van." He says, "You know what? That van hasn't run since I bought it." He says, "You know, you could take it. Here's the keys. It's right down the road." It's like,
all that for that anti-climax.
yeah, he got the car. So he says, "These guys," he says, "guys are delivering me a check for $14,000 in a few minutes." He says, "So I don't need it in." So that started a thing where I developed letterhead. I developed a check with a scratched out number on it, voided or whatever.
Yeah.
And for the difficult repos, I used to send out these letters. American Sweepstake, Ken Doyle, and I had a phone number that went directly to a trap line. So when they called in, I also trapped their phone number so I could do the record search and find out where they actually lived. So that worked very well. Till one day in the office, I got a knock on the door, and the guy's name was Agent Butterworth from the Rhode Island Attorney General's office. He knocked on the door, comes to the office, and he says, "I'm looking for Ken Doyle."
You have won, sir.
No, so he says, I says, "That's an AKA for me." I says, and I knew it was perfectly legal what I was doing.
Yeah.
But, I knew that they were going to probably get a complaint or whatever. I says, "Listen," he says, "got a complaint that you've been sending letters out or whatever, offering people money or whatever." I said, "Listen," I says, it's a repo company." He says, "Oh, it's a reverse sting." Right? So he says, "Oh, that's cool, no problem. You're not in any trouble at all."
Cool.
The only challenge I did have is once with Citizens, Eastern Bank at the time, I had a check number and I left the routing number on the check and I didn't cross it out.
Got
The
it.
lady actually went to the bank and tried to cash the check, even though it said void on it. So I got a call from their security and said, "Listen, if you're gonna do that, you gotta take the routing number off the check, cross it out or whatever."
So the fake sweepstakes check?
Yeah, the fake sweepstakes check. You went to try to cash it. So I went from that to I always tried to find people's weakness. Okay, and if they had bad credit or something like that, maybe a credit card offering for a new credit card company,
Got it.
and they would eat it up, and became very successful. Had one of the largest repossession companies in Rhode Island up until '98, and I was still doing investigations at the time. But the repo was the bread and butter. You know, the repo was the bread and butter. '98, I got out of the repo business. One of the accounts owed me over 10 grand. That was a lot of money back then.
So the car dealership owed you money?
Owed me money over 120 days. They kept on saying the check's in the mail, the check's in the mail. I really had a burnout. And I just told them, you know what? Come and get your cars. If you don't come in, and I was charging them no storage to keep their cars.
But you're charging $100 a car, they owe you 10
Back
grand.
in '98, it was more than that. '98 was almost like $250 a car.
Okay.
And the storage charges were like $20 a day, but I was waiving the storage on his big account because they would give me like 30 a month, you know, picking up 30 a month. We were picking up at one point like 60 cars a month.
So, I mean, you talking like Providence, Pawtucket,
Everywhere,
Woonsocket?
Rhode Island, Massachusetts. I went as far as Virginia to get a car.
And what was like, I remember watching that show on, I think it was on A&E for a while, Repo Wars.
Yeah.
So these guys would go out and
No.
they would stake it and then
No,
they'd grab it and tow it. Like, what was your...
I had a very good policy, I think, and I always look to God for guidance. Okay. And one of the things I always did is I tried to maintain not the attitude that they were any inferior to me. I never called them names or anything like that. I had a Rottweiler, okay, named Shauna, and I put her in the vehicle. When I approached the house, I always had a key most of the time to buy hair pay hairs, and if we didn't, we had to make a key for the bank cards. So I would put her in the vehicle, knock on the door, and ask them if they wanted to clean it out. And Shauna was very aggressive, so. I'd say 97% of the time, I got the key handed to me. Because we always ask for the key. We knock on the door, ask for the key.
Respectful.
You want to clean it out, you know. If they said no, I said, listen, I really want you to clean it out. Because if it goes to the tow yard, and somebody breaks in the tow yard and steals all your stuff, then you haven't got your stuff. Take your stuff, you know. And not only that, I says, this way here, I can tell the bank you're cooperative, you know, because they hold the vehicle in Rhode Island for 11 days, then it goes to public auction, okay? If they don't redeem it, the whole thing. And a lot of times, when you get repossessed, the bank can call the whole note. So they want the whole thing right up in front. But if they're cooperative, I've seen where they worked out with people. There was two funny incidents. One was I repossessed the wrong car in Rhode Island one time, and the key fit. It was a Buick Sabre. And back then the keys weren't all that, you know what I'm saying? You could find a key that fit another car. This was just a same color, same make, same model, same address. The person had moved to Connecticut, but the car was in front of the house, and I thought it was the car of the person I was repoing from. Got in, started the car, drove down the road, and something told me to check the glove. I checked the glove, and I see it's not even the right car. So I back up the car, put it in park, shut the door.
How was the window?
Then we had one in Boston. We had a cleaning company, and they had 3 sequential serial numbers, okay, on the vehicles. Well, we got the 3 vehicles, and I had gone to Boston Police Department and showed them the title and everything, and they even thought that the last number on one was a 3, when in actuality it was a 5. So we picked up the 3 vehicles. I got a call from Boston Police that the guy's reporting the car stolen, with the one that says number 5. He says the other vehicle he had that night or whatever. He says so I don't know what you want to do. So what I did was I called the lien holder on that. He gave me the information on the lien holder. It was a different bank. So I called that bank and found out the car was up for repo. I said, well, I have the car.
Perfect.
So that worked out pretty good. So anyway, so getting into the constable business was in 2004. My friend Darryl, who's also a constable, he was doing family court stuff. He was also a private investigator. He worked at Zara Ames. I helped him get his PI license. He worked for me in repos. He ended up getting his PI license. We ended up working together for a while, had the same office, but different businesses. But we worked on a lot of we still talk about it today. There's no PIs in this state that know what we know, or went through what we went through, or had the cases that we had back then. And I'm talking, organized crime cases, investigating mayors or senators or whatever, dirty politicians. And nobody knew this. Nobody knew what we had done, because we went deep undercover a lot of times. And so we had a case in Woonsocket where a guy who just got out of the ACI. There was a robbery at a pizza store, and they had picked him up like a minute after the robbery, walking into his house on River Avenue in Woonsocket. And we ended up going back, recreating the whole thing and proving that it wasn't him, because he didn't have the time to get from the pizza store to where he was, either walking, running, or whatever. So he ended up getting acquitted. Okay, but had it not been for us, because we had another case where we had to take a plastic print of a footprint. I don't think there's too many PIs that know how to dust for prints or take a plaster cast. We covered everything. We learned everything we could about the business, but we did it the old-fashioned way.
Right.
And that was the thing that made us separate us from all the other investigation companies or investigators out there. Darryl and I worked on a lot of things together. We actually had a gun pulled on us in Bellingham, Mass, back in, I don't know, 92 or 93, I think it was, and of all places in Bellingham.
Right.
And we pull up to take the car, and the guy comes out, and he's got his hand in his pocket on the butt, and we both carried, you know what I'm saying? And he's ready to pull a 22. I opened my coat, I had a 45, and I says, I don't think your gun is big enough. And Darryl was in the passenger side, he had a 9mm, and he had his hand on his 9, and the guy went back in the house. And it wasn't even his car. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't even his car. It was a girlfriend's car. So anyway, so we ended up getting out of there with the car and everything. So anyway, Darryl got me, I got him into PI, I got him into ZIA, I got him into the PI business. So he said to me, he said, Mike, why don't you be a constable? I said, well, what's that all about? So I went, and at the time you had to train for a short period of time to be a constable. And you were appointed by the chief judge, okay, but had to go through an interview system with 5 attorneys, okay? But you had to train about the laws in the Rhode Island, the civil laws and everything else. And what a lot of people don't know is, and we were talking about this earlier, is you're just a constable. You're just a constable. You don't understand that we're not just a constable. We have the same authority in the statute of law in Rhode Island as a sheriff or a deputy sheriff for civil matters. We have arrest powers on civil arrest. We serve restraining orders, okay? We enter into some very dangerous situations. Anything from the court. I chose, after doing years of collections with a big collection account firm that collected for credit cards, I chose to go into evictions and do the hard stuff. Because there's only a small percentage of constables out of over 130 that do evictions in the state of Rhode Island. There's only, I think, like 10.
Really?
Total. Maybe a little bit more, but most of them don't do them on a regular basis. There's a few of them that do, do just, not just evictions, but they do have some big evictions. They do foreclosure evictions, which is a little bit different because the banks don't allow us to contact the tenant or give them any type of warning whatsoever, and just to order the truck, show up on the day, and move them out, okay? And when we get the process, I mean, you know the process, but I'll explain the process of eviction, okay? The process of eviction starts with the lawyer or the landlord sending out a 5-day demand letter to the tenant, okay? And they have to be 15 days in arrears. So once they send that letter out, the tenant has been notified basically that they're in arrears, and if they don't comply, that they're going to end up, being sued for eviction. because it is a suit, it is a lawsuit. So now, they don't do anything. So now comes the attorney, okay? Like Steve Conti, you know, he's one of the best in Rhode Island, and I will say that. I've been doing Steve's work for 18 years. Steve knows the ins and outs of eviction law like no one else, that maybe a couple of other people. But Steve has a very large eviction business, a very large following, and he comes very highly recommended because he does what he's supposed to do. So now comes the point where the constable from Steve's office gets these summons. It's either me or Shirley Cares, and she's another good constable. Okay?
Summons, tell the folks at home, what's a summons?
A summons is when they don't show up and they don't answer the 5-day demand letter. So now the attorney has to go to court and get a summons. A summons is a summons to court.
Okay.
And typically before COVID-19, there was a 9-day hearing from the date of the date of the date on the service. We could serve it up to 5 days prior to the court date. But now with COVID-19, it's changed a little bit. So now, and I don't know if it's going to stay this way, but when we get the summons now, it says right on it that the tenant has 5 days to negotiate with the landlord to be able to square up or make an agreement, and then the attorney can, obviously make a stipulation or something like that, which means that they pay so much on the back and so much on the future. One of the things that, once you get the summons and the tenant is served, and we go out there and serve the summons. So when we go out there and serve the summons, we always have to have the landlord meet us there to make sure that we can get into the building. The process of the service of the summons is a little bit different than serving or what you see on TV. We do not have to serve the tenant or anybody in the apartment with that summons. We can tack it on the door on the initial summons. A lot of people don't realize that, and for that reason, a lot of people don't show up in court. They think that, oh, I didn't get served, they didn't touch me with it. I don't know if you remember that TV show with that process server, the same time those repo shows were on in New York, but he had to touch the people, or he had to make sure he touched them with it, whatever, or something. So they thought they had to be touched, and sometimes people try to get away from you even when you're trying to serve them. So we can drop it gracefully at their feet, not throw it on the
Take
floor.
a picture of it and prove
I posted, the summons in the back says posted, it says either served to the defendant or served with someone who lives there, suitable age and discretion. But on a regular summons, but on an eviction summons, you can leave it with anybody that lives there, or you can post it on the door. So if they say that their cousin and a relative, whatever, I don't give it to them, I post it. But in this COVID-19, they've been posting all of them. Okay, so you post it, I take a photograph now with a time and date stamp on it, okay? And I've done that probably prior to a lot of other constables actually taking photos of the summons. Some of them just think you just leave the summons and that's it. And hey, if they say they didn't get it, it's supposed to be that the law says that they received it anyway. But I've been called in to testify a few times because people said they didn't get it, and I had to produce the photographs, which is no big deal. It's part of the job going to court when that happens. So now after they get the summons, their job is to respond to the summons by supplying an answer, whatever the law tells them to do in that summons they have to do. So if they don't comply with that, then what happens is that the attorney or the landlord will go to court on that hearing date. And if the tenant does not show up, then the judgment is issued pending an appeal by the tenant. They have 5 days to appeal. So in most cases, most people don't appeal. And most of the time, they're not going to win anyway because the landlord has the right to get the money. So if they do appeal, sometimes there's an appeal process and it goes to Superior Court. If they don't appeal, the bottom line is the next step is a full eviction. Now, because of COVID-19 right now, we get the execution from the court it basically, we have to give them a 48-hour notice now, or an actual notice that says you have 48 hours to vacate, or, subject to removal of your belongings and, of yourself, okay? And even police departments don't even understand, some police departments do. Providence is fantastic. Central Falls is great.
Who's not great?
I really don't want to, I can say is that Pawtucket has changed their policy over the last couple of years with thinking that a constable is, or they're called just to show force to get the people out, and the constable, they're doing the constable's job. That's not the case.
So let me ask you this. Why is it not black and white, a top down from maybe the governor or the chief justice that says constable and police do X, Y, Z? Why is it municipality specific? That seems sloppy.
It does seem sloppy.
You got how many municipalities in Rhode Island?
39.
So they all have
police chiefs.
different rules.
But they're all great, except for one issue with the Pawtucket Police Department that apparently, I think they're a great police department, but I think they don't understand what the job of the constable is and what their job is to stand by to keep the peace, to protect us, as well as not understanding that it's a trespass and eviction. It says it right on it. So when we give that, I think it's 11, I forget the statute, 1126, I'm not even actually sure, but it's a trespass. So if they've overstayed their welcome, and you give them the notice, you give them the 48-hour notice, it says trespass and eviction right on it.
Mm-hmm.
So if they don't move, they've already violated the trespass part of it,
Right.
okay? So they need to, so if they don't move at that point, then it's a trespass. So we call the police, say, listen, we have tenants, in such and such a location, need an officer stand by to keep the peace, because I need to ask them to take a bag of clothes, take, in today's day and age, it's gotten a lot worse because, I wear vests. You've seen my vest, okay?
Yeah.
It's on the outside. I don't have it today. It's not in the vehicle. I left it at home, but it's a full body armor, okay, to protect the chest, the back, the sides, and everything. And the reason for that is I had an incident with one of yours, actually, in 2015.
And I have to say, it's beautiful we have the sirens in the background. It adds great flavor to the interview.
There we go. When I got that execution from you back then.
Which street was that one?
That was on Cleveland Street in North Providence.
Oh, yes.
That was a third floor.
Growing pot.
North Providence police met me there in the parking lot. They had a warrant for the individual on the third floor. It was a third floor setup where there was no covering. You had to walk straight up the stairs.
Right.
The door was right there. So that makes it a very dangerous situation, especially the information that we had that this guy had a shotgun
On the table.
No, because one of your maintenance guys had a shotgun case in the hallway on a call there prior to the execution. That's why we knew that he had a shotgun, or believed to have a shotgun inside the apartment. So we didn't know if this guy was going to shoot through the door. We didn't know what was going on inside. I didn't know about the marijuana in the grow house and the stolen Social Security cards and everything else this guy had in there when we entered. So we knock on the door. The guy has the door chained. Now, on an execution, on a full execution, we have the right to enter by any means necessary to remove the tenant, etc. And at this point in time, when the guy tried to deadbolt the door on me again, I pushed on the door. He went back a little bit. I was able to enter with the police. He was headed about 10 feet away for a bedroom. Corner of my eye, I put a shotgun on the bed, and it just happened so fast that I had grabbed the guy with my arm and kind of pushed him back toward North Providence Police to stop him from getting to the firearm. They immediately handcuffed him. And when they entered the bedroom, the shotgun was a Mossberg, fully loaded, and it had 30 30 cartridges on the bed, ready for use. So that could have been a lot worse than it was. I did not have a vest on at that time. Right after that, I bought my vest, okay? Right after that, I bought my vest, and I wore it ever since entering an apartment on a full eviction. So I mean, God was with me, and even the North Providence police officers that were there,
Well, that's a good point, not to cut you off, but your message to Pawtucket police, because they're gonna be watching, we're in Pawtucket, that story specifically, just right next door in North Providence, I was off Mineral Spring, shows why you need the police there.
Well, we had an eviction in Pawtucket.
It's not like you're evicting these little old ladies wheeling their carts out. You're evicting people that have nothing to lose, and
Right, and we don't know,
fake.
an eviction is almost comparable in some cases to a domestic, okay?
Yeah.
Where you don't know what's gonna happen, you don't know what's behind the door. I never, ever, ever would want to use a police department just to show up and scare the people. Just to be there to stand by to keep the peace. That's it. And we had a couple of issues in Pawtucket police. One of them which was on Pearl Street, and the girl that was being evicted, I had called at the time, this was like 2-3 years ago. I had called at the time, and they had called me back on the phone, and they were sending officers to stand by to keep the peace. They told me to wait. They had a warrant for apparently a boyfriend of hers for some serious charges, and they thought he might be in the house. So they showed up. They ended up taking their position outside. Because I have the execution, they can't go in first, okay? They don't have a warrant to kick the door down for the house. They have a warrant for the subject inside.
Right.
So my knock on the door allows them to enter, and they get a free look on the execution as well.
Right.
Because of the fact that we have a court order to enter.
Yep.
So lo and behold, we're searching the room by room, and I come into a bedroom door, and I push the door, and I feel resistance in back of the door. And then all of a sudden, I can see through the crack where the door is, there's a black male there, kneeling down. And I just yelled, "Oh, I think this is him." And they came, and they arrested the guy, okay? And he was wanted on, I don't know what, but some serious charges. So again, it helps them to come to our evictions, because we don't know if somebody's going to be wanted. In Woonsocket, we had 2 people arrested on felonies. In East Providence, there was one where they had showed up, and they told me that the guy's, the woman's son was wanted on an armed robbery charge in Pawtucket, So we don't know what we're going into. Right. And we appreciate, believe me, we appreciate the police department's efforts. And I can tell you, this all stopped about 2 years ago when I had an eviction on Mineral Spring Avenue, where the lady who was living there, who wasn't even the tenant, or her boyfriend or whatever it was, and they showed up, and I had a big disagreement with them, and the girl was telling me, well, I worked for the city, so they're not going to evict me, and I worked for the police department before, and I know all the cops and all this here. So, sure enough, what ended up happening is the police officer ended up coming, and the sergeant ended up coming, and I was outside, and I said, I can, I tell you why. He says, listen, he said, my officer called for assistance, he needs me. I says, he called because I requested you, because he was kind of getting in the middle of the court order and telling me what I need to do for my job, okay? And of course, you know what? I mean, they all covered one another, of course. I ended up being sitting in my car, threatened with arrest and everything else, because they said I acted inappropriately there on that eviction, which I did not, okay? I was doing my job as ordered by the court to let them know they had until Sunday night to vacate the premises, And the bottom line is that there was an unfortunate situation where sometimes police departments or police officers might know somebody or whatever, and it's politics. And that was a situation of politics, okay? Cut and dry. And right after that, I bought the body cam. So now I protect myself on all evictions for situations like that as well, But I said for the most part, 99% of the time, the Pawtucket police are right there for other instances. But for evictions, they have been probably lagging behind as far as not understanding, I think, what we do, not understanding what our job is actually to remove people. And because I get police that show up and say, you know, what is an execution? And we have a little bit of an education. I give them a copy, or I explain to them that this is an execution. This is what is supposed, this is what a constable has to do, and this is the way that we do it. Once the truck arrives, or once we intend to lock the door and have them move their stuff out at that particular time, they have no more rights to that apartment. Once that execution is issued, once the judge signs that order, they have lost the possession at that point. So we go and give them a 48-hour notice. We still are maintaining possession, even though we're not physically possessing it, but we're letting them know that we're letting them have 48 hours to get their stuff out. Otherwise, we can call a truck immediately. We don't have to give them 48 hours notice. Right now we do because of COVID-19.
Right.
But when that goes away, we can just show up at the truck.
And pause right there.
Okay.
So the police departments that, oh, what's an execution? Oh, what's an eviction? The simplest way to put it, Mike, is I'm here to make this person homeless.
No,
That's what you're doing.
Well,
you're kicking them out. They have to leave. They're trespassing, and their stuff may go to storage.
they step over.
So the police need to look at that like, okay, how might that person react to this adversity?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to ever use the word that we're there to make the person homeless. We're
That's
there
what
to
that
enforce-
document enables you to do. And you don't do that. You're flexible. You give them 48 hours. You've given them more than that. You've given them an extra day. You've waited for a U-Haul to show up. You're the fairest guy that I know in a business where you don't need to take any of that. You can just say, I'm here, get out, I'm calling the police and moving truck.
Right.
But you give them the flexibility. But my point is to the police is, he can go there and just cause a shit show if you wanted to.
Yeah, we could just show up at the truck and move them out.
And that's how they need to look at, what your job is. So I just want to make that point.
Well, I think we had Providence Police Chief Clements come to one of our seminars. He's great. He was amazing, and he's told us if we ever have a problem, call directly to him. We've had very few issues in Providence, a couple, but not many. And we have great response in Providence, great response in North Providence. Did one 2 weeks ago. They sent 4 officers and a sergeant. And one of the things I think Pawtucket wants us to do is call in advance, and let them know, like they want us to call a day in advance, but I've done that in the past, and you know what? They don't remember.
Forget.
Yeah, so I mean, unless you call to the same person who's going to be there the next day. So that's what I did in North Providence. I'm starting to do that more and more in Providence. No need to do that because they show up and they help us to explain the situation. A lot of the other challenges we have is I don't speak Spanish.
Yep.
And there's a lot of Hispanic people, Laotian people who don't understand English. I mean, they can rent an apartment, they can sign a contract. When it comes to the execution, they don't understand what you're trying to tell them, that they have to move. Rhode Island has probably the toughest eviction laws in the country, okay? There's other states where they got numero uno days to vacate, okay?
Massachusetts, we see is slow
process.
and more expensive too.
Right. And I think that's because Rhode Island has a lot more landlords who are politicians too, which keeps the laws in their favor, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, I don't think a tenant should, once you give them the notice and, if you give them 4 or 5 or 6 days because they have a lot of stuff, I mean, they should take that opportunity instead of saying, I'm going to call my lawyer or I'm going to call this one. And instead of wasting that negative energy, call a church, call some friends. Get the stuff out of here so you don't bear the expense of what we had one, and the bill is over $15,000 because the moving company was there 9 days.
And
But it is what it is.
The homeowner had to pay for that, right?
The bank had to pay for that one,
Oh,
yes.
oh,
The bank had to pay for that foreclosure.
Got it.
Right? And she specifically stated, I want everything. And there was a lot in that particular load that was moldy and bad, and we basically took everything out of that house. They took everything. They even had cardboard, huge cardboard boxes, like almost like a storage bin, filled up with trash, and took the trash because this woman said she wanted everything.
Well, remember, right up the street here on Summer Street, you did an execution for us. It was like a bar, restaurant type of thing.
Oh yeah, with the video camera on, the guy said there was
So
something
you
missing.
wore your body cam. He wore his body cam. The movers came, took all the stuff out. You did a nice inventory. The movers gave us the bill of lading. It was clean. It was neat. The tenant then came back and said, "Oh, where's my? I think it was like Apple laptop or MacBook or something." So Mike goes, "Okay." Sends me the video, I review it, it's the whole move-out process, no laptop at all. And you saved yourself
Right.
a headache.
Right.
And that's one of the advantages and why we only use you is because you're professional, you're efficient, and you document everything.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I try to body cam every full eviction there is. Even at Summonses, I'm starting to wear the body cam now more and more too.
What's the storage capacity on that?
32, what was it, gig, whatever.
Gigabytes?
Whatever you call it on it.
So how
on the
long
car.
is that? Like,
The new one I bought, which I'm not wearing right now, is 10 hours of video.
okay.
This one takes like a pause on this here. This takes like maybe 10 minutes and then shuts off. And you have to turn it back on again.
Got it.
The other one's continuous for 10 hours.
So you would use maybe that one on a summons where you know it's going to be a quicker
Yeah,
interaction. maybe?
and a body cam is perfectly legal to use, whereas audio is not. If your audio taken more than one person, because it's a one party consent in Rhode Island. You can't have 2 or 3 people in a conversation. You know what I'm saying? On a tape recorder, it becomes illegal at that point. So I can record you without your knowledge, but if there's a second person there or a third person there, then it becomes against federal law.
So hopefully there's nobody else in this room right now because we'd be breaking them.
No, because we're on video too. Right.
So let me ask you this. You said in the beginning, when you started, you did it the old school way. You were doing your research, your investigations, you were putting the plaster to get the mold of the foot. How has that changed today? Is police work easier today, investigative work, or is it harder, or is it just changed so much that they're doing it a certain
Well,
way?
investigations has changed. Rhode Island, it is not legal to use a GPS on a motor vehicle. And I was so upset when they passed that law, because when they passed that law, they passed it at the 11 o'clock hour. They were supposed to have a hearing, and they passed it the night before they were supposed to have the hearing. So a lot of us investigators who wanted to go couldn't go, and they passed the law. And they passed the law and saying it was something to do with the domestic violence law. They put it under the domestic violence law. And so my problem with that is, I had a case in Massachusetts with a GPS case, and the operator of the vehicle, the non-custodial father, was driving at 94 miles an hour on the GPS speed with a 5-year-old in the car. Now, you're not going to go 94 miles an hour, but you can track the GPS and get there and get the video documentation when they arrive to show that he got in the vehicle at point A, he gets out of the vehicle at point B, GPS showed 94 miles per hour the whole time, so therefore, the person must have, obviously he must have been driving 94 miles per hour. And the court upheld that, okay? So the court upholds the GPS database, okay? But in Rhode Island, we're not allowed to put a GPS on a vehicle, but we can in Massachusetts. Rhode Island passed the law. It's a misdemeanor in Rhode Island, but I don't even want to be charged with a misdemeanor, being a PI and a constable, and having a firearms permit and all that's there. So Massachusetts is good with that, and there's loopholes that PIs can get away with by having the client drive the other person's car if it's a custody of a domestic, if they have access to the vehicle. Drive it to Massachusetts, put it out in a parking lot. Then you're not breaking the law, okay? In Rhode Island. So that's what I a lot of times have clients do, because the GPS technology has taken, and where we used to have to use 2 or 3 agents on an investigation, we now only have to have 1, because the GPS, we have to attach the GPS, and we have to, monitor the GPS for a week. So I rent the GPSs for $500 a week, 200 install, 200 to take it off, and if they want a second week, it's 300 for the week or whatever. Then we incorporate that with a discount on surveillance on the investigation end. But getting back to the constable, the executions. One of the other things is the authority that we have is in civil body attachments. Now, I don't know if there's going to be a change in that or why, because they're not doing as many body attachments as they did before.
And tell the folks at home what a body
attachment is a civil arrest where we actually have the authority to handcuff someone if they're not willing to go to court on their own. So we can actually handcuff them. We have to put them in our own vehicle, which causes a liability for us for insurance. The police department cannot take them on a civil. It's not an arrest as far as like any criminal record, but it is a detainment, and we bring them directly to the court. This would be if somebody owed, let's say, a large collection bill to Capital One. Let's say they owe $20,000, didn't show up in court. The client ordered a body attachment. We go out, find the location of the person. We first ask them to meet us at court tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. I'll be at the soda machine. We'll go upstairs, give them the body attachment to the clerk, come back down. You'll sit in the courtroom. It'll be an arrest, so you won't be able to leave.
Right.
I'll have to escort you to the bathroom, whatever it is, until the judge hears your case.
Yep.
If they refuse, or if they're going to be difficult, then we show up. We always ask the police again for stand by to keep the peace, but we have to take everything into control. We have to do a pat search on the person. We have to have an evidence bag for their keys and their wallet and everything else. We have to mark it clearly as evidence. We have to seal that bag, obviously, and bring it with us to the court. Then we go to the courthouse, and then we can turn them over to the sheriff department, who will then lock them up until the case is called. Okay? Once the case is called, the judge normally will give the person the option to, one, pay the body attachment fee on the spot, and two, make a payment on the restitution, on the money they owe on the collection, and start getting back on track. In Rhode Island, the judge has the option to jail someone for up to 21 days on a body attachment if they refuse to do nothing or at all. It can lock them up in the ACI for 31 days.
Does that happen?
It has happened once that I know of for me for 7 days, and once for 2 days that people
So a
did.
debtor, somebody that owes money, could go to jail.
One was $50,000 though. One was $50,000, and it was a large, it was 2 debts. So brought her in on a body attachment, and when I was at the house picking her up, I noticed there were some original paintings on the wall, and she had gone out of business with some type of shoe store or something, and I had told the judge, because the constable has to present the prisoner, and or the judge will ask who brought, are you the constable who brought her in, and and I'm saying, Your Honor, I just want to let you know that while I was at the house, I saw, numerous paintings worth well over the money. She lives in a, $250,000 house, whatever it is, you know what I'm saying? Whatever you can help to make sure that your client is going to get paid, A lot of constables don't do that, but I treat my job more as I was trained as a military police, with observation skills, as an investigator with observation skills. A lot of constables just show the paper, that's it. They don't go into understand. A lot of constables don't even understand their own job. Okay, the president of our association, Kenny Region, is phenomenal. Okay, he's a phenomenal president. He's a good person. He's always available if someone has a question. One of the things I want to point out is constables are independent, so even though we have an association, we don't have a boss.
So I have a question about
Yes.
that. I had Steve Conti on last week, and he said that you, as an association, like you said, you're all independent contractors, but your association or your management is mandating a certain price that you must charge all of your clients.
I have not been told that or
So
even
Steve
suggested
said that's
that.
like an antitrust type of situation, because you guys all should be charging
whatever we want, because we are independent. Exactly. Under the state law in Rhode Island, okay, constables can only charge a set amount of money for certain things. That means that the defendant only has to pay a certain amount. A constable can actually charge whatever they want.
Correct.
Okay? So on a summons, the state law says that we can only charge $0 to $45. That means the defendant will have to pay $0, $45, whatever it is. Constable can charge $60 if he wants for a service, and there's some that do, but they're not going to put $60 in the box where it says they're going to put 45 max, okay? And the other, the money is going to be paid by the client, but the defendant only has to pay what's on that piece of paper.
Right.
Same thing with an execution.
Yep.
I don't know any constables that will do an eviction for $45,
Right.
okay, an execution. But executions, they only have to pay $45. So if
Okay.
I evict Joe Schmo or whatever, okay, the thing is that I think in the discussions that we've had is there are not a lot of constables that do evictions.
Correct.
Okay. There's two out of Steve's office, Shirley Cares and myself, Mike Cares, her husband. But the bottom line is that no one can tell us what to charge.
Okay.
But I think what they're trying to send a message, if you want to call it that, is that we kind of should be a little bit uniform.
Got it.
So nobody's cutting anybody else's throat.
Got it.
Okay? But I think that was the message that was sent through the association, that, you don't want to be charging $200 and have somebody charge $30.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, I mean, you know the quality of my service. I don't know the quality of somebody that you're going to pay $30 to. You know what
Sure.
I'm saying? And what they're going to do, and what they, how, you may end up in a big lawsuit, a liability, But I think the danger of the job, the fact that we have to go out there and on an execution, now on an eviction, and we have to enter someone's house we don't even know, or even approach, go into the building itself, we don't even know who has COVID, who has symptoms.
Right.
That's a life and death situation it could be, or a very serious illness if you get COVID. I mean, the demeanor of the tenants sometimes, they don't care, They don't wear masks coming outside. They blow smoke in your face, They don't care about your health. They don't care about paying their rent.
Right.
So, but the bottom line is that I have not heard, nobody had said to me that, you have to charge this, because no one can tell us what to charge.
Right.
It's just a suggestion that we all kind of be on the same
Maybe get
page.
uniform.
Yeah, that's kind of what
Yeah.
I think
Well, that makes sense.
what the
Different,
thing is.
different from what Steve was saying.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, like I said, Steve charges one price. I'm sure the other attorneys will charge other prices, but I'm sure there's some people who want to compete against him also because they know he's the best. You know what I'm saying? They want to learn from. They want to learn from the best, and try to be uniform with the best, or even undercut the best, so that they can get the business.
Get the business.
Unfortunately, I wish they would. Two things I wish. I wish that there would be a mandated price for everybody.
Yep.
And I wish that there would be training sufficient for us in firearms and a class, even if it's like 5 or 6 weeks on the aspects of what we do. That was, they've given us the authority to do certain things. They've given us authority to basically go in a window on an execution, okay? And given us all that danger, okay? Given us the authority to cuff someone and bring him to court.
Yep.
But with that fact is we never got any training for that, okay? One time we had a handcuff training years ago. What about the new constables?
Right.
What about the new constables coming up? Where's their training on evictions and executions? You know what I'm saying? Yeah, they get trained for 90 hours, okay? Initially by a constable who has, served in good standing for 10 years. okay?
But look at our business, real estate. They make us do continuing education, 24 hours of it every 2 years.
Yeah, we have 10 hours every 2 years.
So you need to brushing up the skills. You need to maybe meet the new guys or gals, etc. So it seems like you bring up a good point there.
Well, I think Kenny's done a good job of bringing in police, like the sheriff's department, the police departments. We had Wesley Police, Richmond Police. We had Providence Police, like I said. We've had Human Resources. We all got certified on a knock-on. We all got knock-on kits. You know, to recognize that. That's another thing out there too. A constable is walking into a house, an eviction, an execution, and he has a full eviction, and he's now responsible for the movers to protect them as well. Okay? Not the police department, because they're only going to be there for a short period of time to make the people left. So what happens is these people decide to come back 20 minutes later with 10 friends. You know what I'm saying? The constable is left to try to quell that and de-escalate that situation. And we always, I mean, even on an execution, always the first thing is de-escalation. I always let the people know, listen, you've been evicted, you have, 10, 15 minutes to grab a bag of clothes, medicine, cash, jewelry. I have a list I give them. And I says, money, take your pets, because if you don't take your pets now, the SPCA is going to charge you with a felony of abandonment in Rhode Island.
It's a felony.
And they do that.
So if you leave your pet...
If you abandon, there are certain aspects of that law that is now a felony.
Good.
And we've had Joe Wazaka from the SPCA, who is now the director, by the way. Great guy. I had to call him 2 weeks ago on one because the guy didn't want to take the animals out of the house, And we ended up, he ended up taking them. Pawtucket Animal Control came, and actually we ended up taking the animals. That again, it's all a situation of Pawtucket Animal Control is great, by the way. They're fantastic. They do their job. They do take the Providence Animal Control again is amazing too. Right now between North Providence and Johnston, they've been municipality, they've been sharing, I guess, whatever. So you might get Johnston when North Providence doesn't have someone available. In Woonsocket, they have Blackstone come down. So again, Joe has got this whole thing straightened out as to make sure there's support there to take these animals out that are abandoned or left behind. The other issue, again, is the fentanyl and the drugs.
Right.
You don't know this. I mean, we had the class on this. I know how dangerous it is. I try to protect myself. I wear gloves initially going in to make sure that if there is any white powder substance, I don't let the movers touch that stuff. Things like that, And if I go in a room and if there's a suspect of drugs or fentanyl in that room, I'm sorry, but that stuff's not going. That can stay there because we're not going to risk a mover breathing in fentanyl and dying over, a couple of $100 worth of furniture that I'll gladly leave it behind. Everything will be on body cam, and I'll write it on the back of the execution left. If something has feces on it, or blood, or is just utterly moldy, we don't take that, But we have to, give an explanation as to why it wasn't taken, because these tenants are going to come back and say, "They didn't take my $6,000 couch." You know what I'm saying? So that's why the body cam is important and photographs are important. So you can document everything because tenants do tend to say they had more than they did in a lot of cases.
True.
So they can turn around and sue the moving company. Because the bottom line is, listen, they're being evicted because they have no money. So now they don't want to pay for their stuff. That's in the average 2-bedroom eviction is well over $3,000.
So Mike, one of the big things is property owners say, "Oh, why am I paying for the moving company? Why am I paying for a month's storage? It's not my shit." So the way it works is they pay it up front. Like you said, 2-bedroom might cost $3,000. But then when the tenant wants to go and reclaim their furniture, their computers, their phones, whatever they left behind, they pay it back and the homeowner gets reimbursed, or how does it work?
Yes, the homeowner gets reimbursed. And the other thing about that too is I get a lot of pro se landlords, even some management companies that call and say, I haven't done this in a long time, but what can I do with the tenant stuff? So I always tell them, we're gonna go do the warning first, 48-hour notice is $200. We'll go there. If we can talk to the tenant, if they're there, if they answer the door, we'll talk to them, maintain social distancing, whatever. Let them know. If you have a contact phone number,
Yep.
I will make a phone call, as I've done many times before. Let them know they have 48 hours. If they're real cooperative, then as well, I might give them 3 or 4 days, depending on what they have. If they're going to be cooperative and say, yeah, I'm looking for a place, and listen, can't wait you to look for a place, but I can give you some extra time if you have a lot of things.
And the point about that and why Mike is great is because he can go there and just kick you out, say time to go. But what's going to happen is that's going to cost the homeowner much more money. So you could potentially get away with just paying the constable fee as opposed to thousands of dollars for storage company and the moving company. So that's one of the many advantages and why we use you, is because you reduce the property owner's expenses at a time where they lost rent, they just paid Steve to evict them, and now, I gotta pay another $3,000? So that's very underrated, Mike. I think what you do there and that savings, it's just not known. People don't know that your skills save thousands just to negotiate time.
Right, and we negotiate also sometime on the execution, because we're the only ones who can. In other words, if you're the landlord and you've got an execution for $5,000 and a constable goes there, number one, you should never contact the tenant in any way, shape, or form. Once you get the execution, you should always turn it over to the constable.
Yep.
Shouldn't go there. You can't, legally, you're doing self-help, and if you go there with the execution, now you're impersonating a constable. That paper says right on it, the duly authorized officer of the court, not to the tenant, and not to the landlord, not to the landlord's property manager. So while you going there and giving the execution or calling the tenant up and harassing them and saying, if you don't move out, I'm going to call the constable's going to come, he's going to move you out, that puts us in harm's way.
Right.
Because now they're expecting us to come. So you don't do anything, you call the constable, let the constable do their job. Because when we go there, we can evaluate the situation a lot more than you can. I've been doing this 18 years, and I can tell who's going to move and who's not going to move, and who's going to pay and who's not going to pay, and who I can maybe get some money for you,
Yep.
and take it off the execution, renegotiate with the attorney to get a stipulation, and the execution is still good. That's another thing too. A lot of landlords don't know is when you use the execution, it's not a done deal if you collect the money on the execution, as long as you don't take current rent.
Right.
But again, talk to your attorney about that. They'll explain all that to you. So if you don't take current rent and you collect on the execution, the constable can take, let's say on a $3,000 bill, can take $2,000, okay? Write it on the execution, $1,000 owed. Now, all of a sudden, the attorney gets a stipulation that's saying they're going to pay $500 next week and $500 in 2 weeks, but they're going to keep the rent current.
Right.
So the next week they pay the $500, and they don't pay the $500 2 weeks. So now the execution is only $500. But now you can execute. You've got some money, and now you can move them out as well. And now if you have to pay for the moving truck, it's almost a wash for that money that was owed. But it doesn't end there, because now that you have the judgment for $3,000 or $4,000, whatever it is, if they didn't make a payment on it, now you can go to court and file a civil lawsuit against the money that is owed on top of it. So now you file a civil lawsuit, they go to court, they don't show up. Now the attorney can put a motion in for a wage attachment or a bank attachment and start garnishing wages to collect the money. The other thing is on the execution is that the execution is valid for 1 year from the date of, has to be used one date of the year. I don't like to use old executions. If it's more than a month old, I question it, because I think that maybe the landlord might have taken some money. Exactly. So the other thing is that when we move a tenant out, no, you can't store their stuff in your basement. I get that all the time. No, you cannot throw their stuff out on the street. No, you cannot say it's all junk. And I hear that all the time. If you think it's trash or you think it's junk, let your constable go there, pay the fee, let him take pictures and document it, let him determine if it's truly trash or if it's something that has to be contacted. Now, we use Jones Moving and Storage, okay? And I think they're one of probably the best because they keep an inventory. They've been doing this for 100 years. They have their own storage facility. That's the other thing I get all the time is like management, I have my own truck. They're from Massachusetts. You cannot call a truck in Massachusetts for a Rhode Island eviction. It cannot be stored in Massachusetts. It has to be stored in the state or in the county of where the eviction took place.
Wow.
Okay? So it cannot be stored out of state. And it has to be a licensed mover with PUC. So you can't just call somebody, Joe Schmo's gonna move everybody for $500 because they're not licensed, they don't have a storage unit, and they don't do things by the book. The other thing is, they can't just dispose of the stuff after 30 days. They have to have an auction for Rhode Island law. That's the other thing. There's moving companies out there that pick up the stuff and then they just dispose of it, or they sell it, or whatever. They can't do that. It has to be stored, okay? Everything that I'm telling you, you can look up in Rhode Island law, especially the moving and storage, who pays that. Because
Why do you talk about the commercial evictions? Like, remember you did, I think it was Chan's up on Broad Street here in Central Falls. That's different. You inventory, but then you hold the auction.
Right, we hold the auction. We have to, on a commercial eviction, it's a little different. They, the attorney sends a letter out. They don't respond to the letter. They apply for the summons. We serve the summons, which is not a typical 9-day summons. It's generally a full district court summons, which gives them a number of days to respond to the summons. And if they don't respond, then they issue the execution. Okay, but for the execution, the summons is it's called a 7-day. And what that is we have to go there and we have to post a date that's different than the seventh day. So it has to be after the 7th day, usually the 8th day, from the date that we serve it, okay? So a lot of times attorneys have a special day they go in court, so we always try to serve it in conjunction with the day they're gonna appear in court to make it the 8th day, okay? So they get that, they don't respond to it, and then you get the execution. When you get the execution for a business, it's a little bit different because now it's not going and knocking on the door and saying, hey, you got 48 hours. Now it's a matter of, okay, I'm showing up with the locksmith, I'm locking the doors, I'm locking them out, I'm changing all the locks, and I'm removing them from the premises with the aid of the local law enforcement, understanding that this is no longer their business. And then we try to negotiate, once we lock the doors and change the locks, we have to post it. And we have to have an auction 11 days from the date that we post it. We have to advertise it in the most local newspaper. If it's in Providence County, it had to be advertised in the Providence Journal, in Pawtucket, the Pawtucket Times. The landlord has to pay that fee, usually up front. Has to pay for the locksmith, has to pay for the constable fee, which is a little bit more on a commercial. Then if we're going to have an auction, if the value of the merchandise warrants us to have an auction rather than moving into storage, then we have to hire an inventory people to inventory everything in the store. Now there's a couple of different ways to do an auction. Some constables just do the whole lot. I preferred to do it the way that we did it that way because I saw more value in getting more money per item or per the whole thing by selling 103 different lots, so that we could make more money to pay back the execution so the landlord wasn't out.
Another advantage to Mike.
Because if you just have an auction and you say, okay, I'm auctioning off 1,000 items, let's start the bidding at a couple of $100.
Right.
You might only sell those couple of, the items for $500, and it might be $6,000 worth of inventory there.
Right.
And the execution might be $4,000. So now the landlord lost that money. So I really have to look at it to determine what's the best way to go with that auction.
Yep.
And I'll be honest with you, I enjoy being the auctioneer. 5, 10, 15.
Oh, you could do that?
Yes, we are the auctioneer.
No, you could talk fast like that guy?
No, I can't.
It's only 25.
No.
But it's like that store that I talked about, it was a convenience store, right?
Convenience store, they had fish and freezers,
So
they had clothing and stuff.
So, alright, yeah, so say you go in there and it's like, alright, you got 25 children's t-shirts, you got 3 freezers, you got 100 salmon frozen. Your theory is, alright, instead of just selling everything in the store for $1,000, why don't I try to get $250 for this freezer? Why don't I try to get $100 for these?
And that's what we did, and we're responsible for the advertising in the Pawtucket Times in that case, but who reads the paper today, honestly?
Right.
So I started advertising on Marketplace and online yard sales,
Facebook, I see
and
it.
putting the auction, the statute of the auction, the location, the date, and the time.
Yep, and I share those when I
And
see them.
I believe that one there, we had like 29 people show up for that auction, and we just made almost about what was on the execution on that one there.
But then your client has to pay you for your fee, which is
The inventory,
more. You
right?
spend
It's
more
it's got to be more. It's probably the constable fee on an auction. It can probably be like $5,000. I mean, because of the time invested, the inventory, just the whole process. Depending on how large everything is.
So do you see a lot of these coming up with the coronavirus? Do you think there's going to be an influx of evictions, commercial?
Oh,
especially?
absolutely there is. Absolutely there is. But I think a lot of this stuff, I think the owners will probably have gotten their stuff out,
Got it.
and it would probably be more of a
Leftovers.
moving like we did over there with Jones Moving and Storage and just taking everything and putting it in a warehouse. And another thing too, if there's a great amount of value, the other thing is that it gives leverage to if I go to let's say I go on the execution and the tenant opens the door and I see a $6,000 dining room set, a $10,000 living room set, it behooves me to talk to the landlord and say, we just need to call the truck if she doesn't move out in 48 hours. Because a value like this, someone is going to want to go get it and pay the moving and storage. If not, you have a lot more value to sell at the auction because everything's auctioned off within 6 months to a year or more. And now the landlord can not make money, but bring the money in to pay for the moving and storage. And then still sue for the execution amount as well. So that, again, I can't stress enough for these landlords a lot of self-help landlords. One guy got arrested in Warwick. I'm sure you saw that on TV in that situation there.
There was a video of that.
Yes. And that's not the only one. There's been other landlords that get arrested because they think the property is theirs. But when they have the court issues the execution, the property's kind of in limbo right now. It's not really theirs, and the tenant doesn't have any rights to it.
Right.
So the constable has to take control of that to determine how he can get the tenant out to take possession back. But in the meantime, the constable literally has more rights to be in that building than the tenant. And I never allow landlords into the property when I'm doing an eviction or an execution because people can say things. You know what? I saw the landlord go in there. I saw him carry out a box or whatever. So you have to be very, very, very careful of that. So I cross all my T's and dot all my I's. And I've had management, well, the other constable lets me in. I said, I don't care what the other constable does. I go by the book 100%.
Yep.
I dot the I's, cross the T's, and I want to make sure for your sake that they don't turn over back and sue you because I'm protecting you as well as carrying out the court order. I want to save the landlord money if possible.
Absolutely.
But a lot of times too is like if I find out the landlord is on the other side and not doing what he's supposed to be doing, and maybe he shut the heat off, shut the electricity off, and if I find that out before I do the execution, I won't do it.
You step back.
I step back, exactly. You have to be able to do that because it's not about the money. It's about the integrity and the justice
100%.
is more important. And I've had a slogan in my investigation business for 31 years: justice will be served. And now other people are stealing that from me. But, so from point A to point B for the commercial, for the landlords, and one of the things is they don't understand either that sometimes they think that everything in there in the business belongs to them.
Right.
And some of the tenants for residential think the same thing, that they think it belongs to them. Tenant's property is tenant's property. Personal belongings are personal belongings. So you cannot take anybody's personal belongings. So when we get the commercial eviction and we move the person out, a lot of time we get a little resistance from the landlord because they don't understand that they have to pay for all that stuff.
Right.
And it's important to let them know that they're responsible, okay, to either pay for the truck, which we can move it out with the truck and move it into storage, but they're going to be footing that bill and paying for it usually within 10 days.
Yep.
And it could be, $5,000-$6,000 for a move for a big business.
Right.
So the smartest way to go, in my experience, has been to have the auction. Pay the $6,000-$7,000 up front to get the auction going. They owe you $4,000, that's $11,000. If you make $8,000, bring it in and pay it on the execution. That pays off the expenses are paid first when you do that, and then all the money goes on the execution.
Yep.
And anything left over has to go to the attorney or to the court.
Got it.
And then it goes to the tenant, okay?
Really?
Yes, because it's their money. If you sell.
If you paid expenses and the execution and there's more.
Exactly. If there's extra, then it goes.
Tenant could.
The other thing too is about pets. Even in execution, either business or the constable is responsible to remove those pets. It's easy when you got a dog or a cat.
Yeah.
What happens when you got an iguana or an alligator or a snake? Now you got to start calling around, and you're responsible to get those animals out of there into a safe haven. So now you're going to call DEM if it's a snake. Now you're going to call. I mean, if it's a snake that's not in Rhode Island area, because I had a situation where I had a snake that was an Arizona rabbit in a cage in Providence, and I had to call DEM. And then we have the case of an iguana. Now you have to make arrangements with a pet shop to take that for 30 days, to hold it for the owner, and then if not, then they can sell it. So now, it's not just going there, showing up, moving the people up. There's a lot of outside things too. And if somebody has a mental issue, or they're elderly, then I have to call Department of Elderly Affairs. Or we have to call, if I know ahead of time that I've got somebody that has a mental issue, or that has some real serious issues needs-wise, I'll call the local police department and ask for a community service officer rather than a regular police officer, so that they can understand better the situation.
Interesting.
To hopefully, and I'll call Elderly Affairs. Mental issue, we had one in North Providence. The officer had to call a rescue. Okay, we've had that happen a few times where people don't want to move and they just sit there. I'm not moving. So rather than getting them arrested, have them medically evaluated. Once they're out, have the locks changed immediately, prevent access. Our job is to take custody and control of the residency there. So that's pretty important, I think, stuff for the landlords to know. Okay.
Sure. So why don't you tell us, before we wrap up here, I want you guys at home to have this to take with you, your favorite PI, private investigation story, and then your favorite eviction story. And they could be funny, they could be scary, they could be mysterious, whatever comes to your mind.
The PI story is probably my first one. My first ever hired by a friend of a friend who gave me a $50 retainer for a missing 3-year-old child. And because it was a friend of a friend, I did it, expecting to get paid at the end of the job, which I never got paid for, to this day. It involved his girlfriend, my friend's girlfriend, who was the custodial mother of the 3-year-old. The non-custodial father had taken the child on visitation. And the information was he was getting ready to take off to Florida. So this was like, I don't know, maybe 6 months after I got my license in Woonsocket. So it ended up being, and actually not far from here, right on Broadway in Pawtucket, it was at Central Force Pawtucket line there on Montgomery Street. It was a situation where I had to do a stakeout because supposedly he was staying at this house or was going to be at this house. So it ended up being, again, no cell phones, no communication, pay phones, okay? So I had checked in with the local police department. By the way, the private detectives are mandated required to check in before we start an investigation to let them know. We don't tell them exactly where we are. We kind of have to tell them we're in this area here, within a half a mile or so, and give them our license plate information, our photo ID. And it's good because at least they know you're legitimate. Yeah. And a lot of cases we check in, but Providence Police is one of the, we don't check in, we just call them, okay? Other departments want you to come in with a copy of the license or whatever. So anyway, so I was there doing a stakeout on a weekend, and waiting. So I knew what he looked like. I knew he didn't have a motor vehicle, but I knew that he was supposedly going to leave for Florida the next morning. So it was like about 2:30 in the morning, and a taxi cab pulls in the driveway, and guy gets out of the back seat. I know that's my guy because I got a description of him, kind of a straggly beard, long hair. And on this house, all the curtains, all the blankets over the windows, okay? And it was like, almost like a typical, what you said, drug house or whatever you want to say. So he gets out of the car and he picks up a green trash bag. I remember it so vividly that he had the trash bag under his arm like a football.
As a kid. And
it was bulky. So I watched him go into the darkened house through the driveway, and I could see the light go on the stairway and up to the second floor, so the lights come on. So immediately, there was a payphone not far from me. I immediately called the police department, and I let them know what was going on. So they come, tell them the situation, so let's go upstairs. So the police officer's knocking on the door, nothing. Knocking on the door, nothing. Finally, we hear the baby, like whining, whimpering. So he commands the person, open the door, he's kicking the door. Open the door, he's kicking the door. So finally the guy comes to the door and we take custody of the child, close DCF, whatever it was at that time, I don't even know if it was DCF or not, and arrest the guy, and we get the child back to the mother.
Wow. And you didn't get paid for that?
Never got paid for it, and unfortunately the mother turned out to be a drug addict later, so the child ended up in the foster care system. But yeah, never got paid for that, but it was the most memorable one because it was the first one, and that's what got me onto the thing that I do on Facebook and for parents missing children. I will, if somebody calls me and they think child is missing, I don't care what time of day or night it is, I drop what I'm doing and I don't charge them. I go use the resources I got to try to help them and supplement the police with the information I gather, give it to the police departments that if they're on the case, you know what I'm saying? Constable story. It was in Providence, and it was an eviction. It was a second family, and it was after the execution was issued, the warning was issued, the tenant was supposed to have been out of the house.
Okay.
So I called Providence Police, stand by to keep the peace, because I have to go through the whole house now and check the house and make sure no one's there, and to see if she's really out. Because I had opened the door, and it looked like there was still furniture there and stuff. So I called Providence PD, and they show up. The officer comes up with me, Check the kitchen, there's like an old kitchen table, some clothing and stuff. Nothing really of great, like, magnitude, just scattered stuff.
Yep.
So we go in toward the bedroom. Actually, there's another one I want to tell you about after this. It's a better one. I just thought about it. But anyway, this one here was a situation where go into the bedroom and it looks like it's a bed abandoned stuff.
Okay.
So now the police officer is looking around, I'm looking around, I look at the closet, and the closet door's open like this much. It's one of those sliding things.
Yeah.
So he gets on the side, and he tells me to go to the other side, you know, and just like be ready, right? And I open the door for him, and there's a woman there, the tenant, and she's got a friggin' knife this long, like this, holding it like this. So he just tells her to drop the knife, you know, and but it could have been worse. You know what I'm saying? You don't know what the heck is going to go on in these tenants' head. The other one that was even more scary than that was that we had one in Woonsocket a couple of years ago on Rathbun Street, and I remember I served the summons there. And it was two guys I served the summons to, and I went back and reviewed the videotape after the incident. And I'll tell you what the incident was. So. We're not evicting the two guys. We're evicting a woman, okay, who's supposed to be living there. So we go back with the execution on the day, and supposedly she is in jail. So we're going to enter the apartment and set it up to call the moving company or just lock it up because allegedly she didn't have much. So in the meantime, a 14, 15-year-old girl walks across the parking lot, and I'm in my vehicle, and I got my vest on with my badge and my body cam. And she looks at me, I see her stop texting, and she enters that house, and she goes upstairs. So I called the landlord, I said, Gary, I said, what's going on with this house? She says, a 14-year-old girl just went up there. He says, yeah, that's her sister. She's incarcerated. I said, okay, so we might have to have DCF come too if she doesn't have anywhere to go, you know. I said, all right, so I'm going to be ready to go knock on the door. So I call Woonsocket PD. They send me two officers, stand by to keep the peace. We go upstairs, knock on the door, no answer. We'll knock on the door, no answer. You hear something in there, like something moving around. So now the Woonsocket police officer says, you know, can I kick it? I says, yeah, you can kick it. I said, we got to get in there. So he kicks the door down. We go inside. Their guns drawn and everything. The window in the bedroom is open. And there's a fire escape. He calls in, lets them know that they went out this way, whatever. And apparently they had a call there before with the same situation. They went down the fire escape. So now we got all the stuff there, and we're going to have it moved out. The 14-year-old girl comes up the stairs now from the front. But she never came downstairs, right? And she says, what are you doing with my sister's stuff? I says, who are you? She goes, I'm so-and-so. I says, well, you were here because her backpack was on the kitchen table. I says, why'd you go down the fire escape, right? She says, I'm not. She was really rude to me. So the cop escorted her out. He said he was going to handcuff her and detain her if she didn't cooperate. So we went back downstairs. My job was done. They didn't, apparently they were going to take the stuff, and it was all junk anyway. It was all junk and stuff. Trash and everything. So they were moving the trash downstairs and everything. So I get a call from the landlord. He says, Mike, he says, where are you? I said, Gary, I'm home. I says, you're all set there. He said you were going to just clean it out, right? And change the locks, right? So he says, Mike, he says, the police were just here. I said, what happened? He says, I found a 9mm fully loaded in the baby's crib. Handgun. So then I get off the phone with him. He calls me back about 15 minutes later. He says, one of the guys came back that was there, and they said they were taking stuff out of the kitchen cabinet, and he wasn't stopping. Apparently they had heroin in bags that they dropped all the way down the stairs on the way out. But that wasn't the kicker. The kicker was that I went home to review that tape on the body cam. And I realized that it could have been really worse because we didn't know who was in the closet, whatever. And even though they had confiscated the gun and everything, I went back to look at the original service a month before. And when I served it to the guy who didn't live there, and I posted it on the door, but he said he didn't live there. He said he was staying there with a friend. I said, well, I can't give it to you. I'm posting it. When he answered the door, he had his hand behind his back like this. I looked in the video. I said, son of a gun, he probably had that 9 on him when he opened the door, and I didn't even know it. You know what I'm saying? So those are kind of situations where you don't know, and if you don't have the training to undertake that, you know what I'm saying? I mean, they give constable licenses out now to anybody basically who passes the training, but our training needs to be more law enforcement geared for observation and training. Because I was a military police for 6 years. I went to MPI school. I teach a training course in investigation, okay? Anybody who wants to take my course is a small fee for it, but it's 16 to 20 hours of investigative skills and of law, of how we can act within the law. Okay, and one of the things is that being a PI, if we see something going on, like a felony or something, we're supposed to report it directly. It's funny because it says report to the Rhode Island State Police Private Detective Unit. There is no Rhode Island State Police Private, but it's in the law in the Private Detective Act in Rhode Island, which I find funny. Now I'm licensed in Massachusetts as well, and Massachusetts has a special unit for private investigators.
Okay.
Yes, and the licenses are very, very different in the respect that, well, my license is out of North Kingston now. They're very professional there as far as the licenses. I can just show you viewers if you want. Show you. And also show you what the Constable ID looks like, because people will...
It's a thick wallet.
We are supposed to wear your ID or your name tag as a constable in Rhode Island all the time. But there are some constables out there that don't wear it, and they still try to do it like undercover, or like, and that's wrong. We're supposed to identify ourselves. So that's what the Constable ID looks like.
Can we zoom in on that?
Absolutely, you can zoom in on it, and on the back it's DVR.
Right there. Michael Clemente. Okay.
And on the back it says Department of Business Regulations. They issue our license now. It used to be issued by the court. And we renew every 2 years, okay? But we have to renew our license. So the other thing on a PI license, and that's the badge the only badge that we're authorized to carry in the state of Rhode Island. You can't have a different badge. You have to have a constable badge that was voted on by the association, but then it's mandated. It's in the state law now too. I have my old PI license from Massachusetts, but I just want to show the back of that. It tells you that this is issued by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Okay, you can show that on the front too. It's still dirty.
Interesting. So this one was issued by the Massachusetts Department of State Police.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
The difference there is that Rhode Island's putting it under the same as my real estate license, the DVR.
No, that's the constable, not the PI license. PI license is issued in Rhode Island by the police department.
Okay.
In the town of which you live.
Got it.
So that's the North Kingstown.
So this is your active one.
Yes, that's the newest one.
Cool. Very interesting.
Yeah. So this is. So you have to have a license to be a private investigator in Rhode Island, and obviously in every state that you work in. Or the case has to originate in Rhode Island.
Where you have a license.
Right. If somebody like wants to hire me in New Hampshire, as long as the case issues in Rhode Island, initiates in Rhode Island or Mass, and I can work on that case.
Got it.
Okay, or California. I've had investigators come in from Texas here that had a case here because they couldn't work here. They had to hire me to kind of guide them and go with them.
Got it.
So yeah.
Before we go, what about somebody who's maybe interested in taking your class? Why don't you tell us about your PI class?
PI class was started about 6 years ago.
Yep.
And I started it and gave it to be able to train people who want to be an agent for a private investigation company, not necessarily my two companies, but any company, because I give them the much education and the background and give them a certificate. So you must have a clean BCI. Of course, you must have motor transportation. Be nice to have a video camera. If you don't, I can recommend the ones that we use.
Yep.
The class is being given online right now. I know we were gonna set up something over here, but with COVID, it's kind of difficult to do that, but it is online. We're gonna do a Zoom meeting. Within the next probably 3 or 4 weeks, I'm going to have a Zoom meeting for 30 minutes to introduce the class, to see who anybody wants to take it. Once you take the class, and if I like you, and if you have what it takes to be a PI, I will use you for my 2 companies in Mass and Rhode Island as an agent, because we're trying to build that as well. So the website is mrandmrsdetective.com. That's MRAND, MRSdetective.com. You can get me on Facebook, Mike Clemente, at First Rapid Response Team, which is abbreviated. Also, like I said, we do missing. I expect anybody who takes the class that wants to be an agent to also be able to volunteer their services when it comes to missing children. Because, I mean, missing children and human trafficking is a whole nother discussion that we could have. That cases I've worked on that have been ultimately dangerous. There have been threats made on one of my family members. Things like that because of the human trafficking, because it's so rampant. If you want to take the class, there's a fee for it. Right now, I think it's probably going to be like $129 for 16 to 20 hours of training. And
Can't beat it.
Can't beat it, and it's a worldwide class now online. I'm putting it on worldwide.
You're teaching it.
I am.
So you're getting the guy. You're not getting one of his subordinates. You're not getting an assistant. You're getting it straight from the horse's mouth, which we just did for the last 2 hours.
Yeah.
So hopefully they grew a liking to you and are interested and maybe want to make a career change, because COVID has changed so many things. I see so many people changing their careers, changing their focus, and this is a career that will give you purpose and also flexibility.
And money too. I mean, private investigators make a good living. You know,
and you're making a difference. Like you
making a difference.
You saved that 3-year-old
custody.
child.
Yeah, you know what? Custody cases hit me right in the heart.
Yeah.
You know, because I love children. You know, as far as protecting them.
Yeah.
You know, smaller children, children that 3, 4, 5, 6 years old that cannot.
They don't know.
No, exactly.
Good for you. So I'll pound it.
All right, pound it.
Keep our 6-foot distance here.
Absolutely.
And if you have any questions for Mike,
My
please.
phone number,
Yeah, throw your phone number out on there.
401-365-3438. In Massachusetts, 617-600-6321.
So we'll have AJ throw that right on the screen there. Your Rhode Island phone number, your Massachusetts, and again, your website is
mrandmrsdetective.com, MRAND, MRSdetective.com, RIStateconstable.com,
beautiful,
and RIDetectiveservices.com.
So you got 5 ways. There's no excuse to say you couldn't get in touch with you.
There you go.
Cool. Mike, we'll have you on again. Thank you very much
All right,
for your
thank you.
time. And if you have any questions for me or for Mike, also leave a comment below on the video and we'll personally get back to you. Okay, so once again, Greg from Nexus. We're here in Pawtucket with Mike Clemente, Rhode Island State Constable and Private Investigator. Thank you very much.